Hello, DevOps people. This is Jochen. I'm back with another live coding session. Welcome to my stream. Today I'll continue my work that I started on Tuesday, where I started working on a DNS cookbook. Outside of my window, there's kind of a blizzard. No one's on the streets anymore. I guess it's just polar bears and white walkers. And supermarkets are closed. My Starbucks has been closed all day, which was kind of a catastrophe. So it's a good time to stay inside, do some nice chef coding, and build some infrastructure. I hope it'll be interesting, and if you have any questions, if you have any feedback, please let me know via the stream's chat. I'd love if you could just send me a quick hello so I can see who's there, and if there's anything you'd like me to explain, if there's anything you'd like to comment, or if you have a few suggestions on your part, feel free to send it my way. At the end of my last session, I wrote down a short to-do list, what to do to get this running, and I spent a bit of time checking these things. So where are we? What I'd like to build is a cookbook that can execute what you see in my editor right now, where you can define DNS records and finally use the zone resource to write the actual configuration file or zone file. Hi Pyromorph, good to have you here. Let's do this. That's my goal. You simply use the resources that I'm building to define the DNS records for a certain zone, and finally you use the zone resource to write it out. And everything is prefixed by NSD underscore because I decided to build on what already existed in the form of the NSD cookbook. Okay, so far that was the goal, and that is still the goal. Now Hi Marcus, good to have you here. I built two resources using the custom resource DSL that Chef provides. So we have the record resource that gets automatically prefixed with the cookbook name NSD, so we'll get the NSD underscore record resource. And so far I've just built it in a rudimentary form that I can see if it actually works, and we'll have to extend this quite a bit while I'm making this a practical cookbook. Main thing is, with the NSD record resources, we simply build up an internal list of DNS records, and this internal list then gets used by the zone resource when it's time to write out the zone file with all the DNS records for that particular zone. I wanted to do proper software engineering and put all the functionality for maintaining this internal list into a different code base. So I built a module NSD cookbook and a submodule zone in that case, and that's where all this management of the record list happens, and we'll have a look at that in a few seconds. So by including this module in the action class block, I can simply use the methods defined by this module. So that's why I can call add record here to use the resources attributes for building up a hash in this case, which I'm probably going to change, and pass this hash to the add record method, which somehow puts it into the list of records. Kind of the same happens in the zone resource, where I include the same module and use the zone records method to get everything that belongs to a certain zone. And with these records, I can then simply write out the template that fills the zone file in the NSD configuration. So one goal was to keep this as readable as possible, and I think I achieved this by putting everything that is management and behind the scenes stuff into a module that is defined separately. Now let's take a look at how this is actually implemented. And that was one thing that I was struggling last time around, but not because I had taken the wrong approach, but because I had accidentally used a very old Chef client version that simply doesn't work with the action class block, or where the action class block doesn't actually work. When I removed the restriction and allowed Test Kitchen to simply use the most current Chef client, things started to work. So there was this first to-do item, research how to build up DNS record collection during Converge, and I actually solved this with using a module attribute. That's what the two @ in front of the variable name mean. This is a global variable in the context of this particular module. Now, Markus M. Heuerung on the stream, one of my colleagues, pointed me to another alternative to store things during a Chef Converge run, which is node.runState. So there is already a hash that you can use to store stuff that needs to be persisted during a Converge run and will then be discarded. To be honest, it's nice to have this, but I don't like it. The reason I don't like it is that it's even more of a kind of a global variable, and not only that, it's a global variable, a hash, where that is used by everyone and anyone. So I can't really be sure that the keys I store in this hash won't be modified by another recipe. I can't be sure if there is a namespace collision, because there basically are no namespaces. So this is just a bit too public for my taste. That's why I prefer to have my own module and a global variable within the module that I can use for the same purpose. And I haven't looked up how runState is implemented, but I could imagine it's even implemented the same way. But I don't care. I have my own solution here, and I find it much more isolated and much less error prone than using something where other people have free access as well. So here you'll find 3 methods: add record, zone records, which is used then in the zone resource, and zones that simply gives you a list of zone names, which are the keys in the hash that I'm building in add record. What I'm doing here in add record is check if the zone is already in the hash, meaning it already has a key in this hash. If that's the case, I can simply add another record to this key and to the array that is the key's value, to be precise. And if the key doesn't yet exist, I create it by assigning an array with a single item, the DNS record that had been passed into this method. That's another nice thing that I get by using a module and basically a library module for this. The implementation is completely hidden from the places where it is used. So here in these resources there is no mention of a hash, of a hash of arrays. The implementation is completely hidden, and I can change it if I want to or if I need to. If it turns out that storing DNS records as an array is not okay for some reason, I can change this without having to change how it is used in the resources. That's a big advantage of creating a library module here. So let's see what happens if I converge this. Not much, but what has to happen does happen. So I'm first calling the master recipe, which does the basic installation and also creates the zones directory that I need to put zone files into. And then I'm calling my test recipe that actually uses the resources provided by the cookbook. It calls NSD record for creating an A record, and then it calls it another time to create an MX record, and then finally I'm using the zone resource to write the zone file for this particular zone. And in my test recipe, the 2 DNS records are assigned to this zone here, example.com. So what it does is, in the end, it writes the template for example.com.zone. And if you take a look at this, it's just a bit of test data. Oh, there's no less on this container, but no problem. So what I'm doing at the moment is just write out the record types that I have. And of course I'll have to extend this. But basically it picks the 2 records I have defined for this zone and writes them in here. What we could do, especially if we want to test it later, is to define another record that doesn't belong to this zone, For example, www.notanexample.com. So the name should be www. The zone is notanexample.com. Type is A and IP address. Let's use 3456. So here's another record, which shouldn't affect the chef run if things are working okay. And yes, it didn't affect it. Chef sees, okay, it's already up to date. That we have defined a third record here doesn't affect the convergence run. That's good. One thing I'd like to do is rename the library file. Since this module is called zone, I'll rename this file from zone data to simply zone.rb. And I think it's a good point to do a commit so that we can preserve what we have. So that's the point I'm starting from today. Do you have any questions? Is there anything you'd like to know or anything you'd like to remark? Okay, so what I also did is I went into the master recipe that Alexander, the initial author of the NSD cookbook, built, and I commented out the part that writes the zone files, because the main part had still been missing, which is to define the records for this. So he only had a template that writes out the contact data in the SOA record and things like that. That'll be, well, we can probably simply delete this completely. Oh, let's let it stay for a while so I can see what the variable list is here. And I'm going to recycle his zone template. Which uses a few variables here to define things. That's all fine and dandy. We'll keep this for the time being, and then I'll simply add another variable, records, and iterate over it. The thing is, I don't really know what to write here. Of course, I could do something like, as I did with my own template, something like record type. I think it's and I've been using symbols for this. So like this. Let's see if this works. Let's simply use this part in our zone resource. And then, oops. Simply add the records that we have here. Which enables me to get rid of my own stupid template. Which was resource zone.erb. And let's see if it still converges. It does not. So let's see what's wrong. Undefined method fqdn for chef resource template. That's because fqdn isn't defined here. So what is fqdn? It's a new resource name. I should simply use name here, not zone name. Okay, and zone name is used here as well. So if we, exam.com is the name of this zone, and that's going to be used in this template. Still not working. ID is also unknown. What is ID? Oh, node ID. To be honest, I don't know why Alexander had been using an extra constant for his cookbook name. It's not as if we'd change the cookbook name anytime soon. So what I was hinting at before was that it's hard to build the part that writes the record, because that will depend on the type of record. And I don't want to make the template too complicated, especially I don't want to have a lot of if statements and stuff, a lot of logic in the template basically. Shouldn't be more than a loop that writes out things, and that's why I'm actively thinking about creating another class called DNS record or something like that, and this class will take the data and we'll have a method to write a zone entry. So in the template I can simply say record dot zone line or something like that, and I'll get the right zone entry for each type of DNS record. But let's get this working first. Okay. Cookbook NSD does not contain... Oh yeah, of course, I've deleted my own template file, so I'll have to use the nsd.zone.erb template. Okie dokie. That's interesting. He used creative missing, and since it's not missing, it doesn't get updated. I shouldn't just copy things. I think it should be create. Oh wait, I think I know what happened here. I was always wondering, what's the use of this cookbook? It writes out a rudimentary zone file that doesn't have any real entries beyond the normal bureaucracy. Oh, thanks for following, Benstar. Nice to have you on the stream. I think what it did is, okay, let's write out my zone files, and then let's keep Chef from touching them again, because I'm maintaining them manually. Dear Alexander, did you use Chef as your templating engine for manually maintained zone files? Well, you don't have to anymore as soon as I'm finished with this change. Okie dokie, so let's do another convert run so I get my zone file updated. And that's how I like it. So it writes out a zone file with origin example.com, TTL and all that stuff. It writes out the name servers, ns1.example.com, which is my own address, I guess, because in this case the test container is the master. I'm calling the master recipe after all. But I'm missing the address after the A record down there. NS1 should have an entry there. And then I have my two type entries. So it's working as I intended it to, but why is... Oh, you expect me to pass in a master IP address. Okay. I'd say that shouldn't be necessary, because we should be able to get all this information from the Chef database, which machines are masters and which are slaves. But for the time being, okay, let's simply define these things in the kitchen YAML file. So I need master IP address, the FQDN, master FQDN. How is that used? What is the difference between master FQDN and FQDN? Huh? Let's take a look at the NSD cookbook. He even only, in his own example, he only defines FQDN. Strange. But let's see. NSD master. It's exactly, yeah, it's NSD master. IP address, master contact. I see you frantically working in the chat, Marcus. Take your time, and I'll be patient what you're coming up with. I'm probably missing something here, but yeah. Well, okay. Let's simply go ahead and define it. So master FQDN is ns1.example.com. Why there is a master FQDN, I don't know. But let's make this ns1example.com as well. The master contact is oh, contact is already defined, but I have to name it master contact, right? If it were me, I'd change it to simply contact, because I don't know what's so mastery about the contact. Well then, where are we? Ah, here. Okay, master contact, master FQDN, and then it's master IP address. If it's not defined, shouldn't it be simply the IP address of the node? That shouldn't be nil, it should be node IP address. And this should be node FQDN. Let's use a default value for the contact as well. Hostmaster at example.com. That way we'll at least see if we forgot to set it. And it's even FQDN IP address and contact. So why is it named master contact in here? Oh, here's master contact. Yeah, okay. That's a bit inconsistent, but I'd be happy to remove this. Marcus, $origin isn't the same as master FQDN. Yeah, it's Of course it isn't. It's the zone name, isn't it? That way we don't have to define the master FQDN. Wait. Master FQDN is master FQDN, so we don't need to define this twice. ns1.example.com. Let's see if this works. It does, but it doesn't change the template, which it should. Still no IP address. Master IP address is NSD master IP address. And NSD master IP address is supposed to be node IP address. Yeah, I'll have to look up the actual zone format. It's been about, I guess, 10 years since I last touched a bind9 zone file. This old brain needs a bit of refreshing. But NSD master IP address should already have a value. So it should have a value for master IP address, which is used in the zone file. Master IP address here. In the A record. So why does the A record not get written? Yeah, you either love DNS and know that stuff offhand, or really don't. To be honest, I've just had a change of mind recently. So before, I followed the motto I learned from Chris Biter, which is everything is a frickin' DNS problem. And now I'm at the point of writing basically my own DNS cookbook, with the goal probably to run our own DNS server. So, but don't worry, we can discuss this in the team. Don't panic. Still, why is that IP address not written? Is the SOA record complete with the master FQDN? It does write ns1example.com. And it, okay, it splits out the first part of the name, ns1, and writes INA, and then there should be the master IP address, which gets passed in, and which should be node IP address. And it is node IP address, right? Oh, we are really down to basics. I should know this by heart, but if things behave strangely. Oh, it's not with an underscore. That's the point. Okay. That trips me up every time. Yay, that's how it's supposed to work. Now it's writing out my IP address. Okay, we're getting closer. Let's close this file. Thing is, this is still pretty brittle because where's my test file here? I'm passing in a few things with resource properties, which is okay. These properties are clearly defined, and then I munch together a hash that I'm passing to this method, and the method then does whatever it does, which is in fact simply add it to an array. And then in the end I need to write out a properly formatted entry. So let's look up how these entries should look like. It's by9 zone file syntax. Yeah, let's take another look at the origin thing. It uses fqdn as the origin, and that should be the zone name. Why not name it that way? fqdn is as generic as it can be. We'll change that. Naming things is important. It's not easy, but it's important. So wherever we have fqdn, we'll use zone. That makes a lot more sense. And then we also don't have to well, now the variables master fqdn and slave fqdn, if used at all, make much more sense. Okay. Fine. Okay, let's take a look at this. So that's how an A record looks like. I'll make this a bit bigger so you can read with me. Host, INA, and then the IP address. Then we have C names, which is name in C name, and then the real name. X records get a preference value. Name servers have just their own names. They get written out automatically because we already know all the name servers. PTR records are not part of this zone file, and then there's the SOA, and here we have an example zone file. Yeah, this looks familiar. Thing is, I'm very reluctant to do something like if record type equals A, then write record name IN A record IP address else if record, you know what I'm getting at, type equals MX, then do something else. That's so ugly. That is so ugly. Instead, I just would like to do something like record bind9 entry, and that's it. Yeah. Okay, I just wanted to drive a point home. Of course, I do know that if-else if can be expressed a bit more elegantly with a case, statement, but we are talking about 50 shades of ugly. Because this tells a story. It really does. It says, okay, we'll have our NS section over here, and then we have our name server address entries here, and then we have all the zone records that are written out as bind9 entries. And that's the end of the story and all we need to know. And record should just know how to be bind9 compatible. And then record could also do all kinds of validations. For example, record could also have enough intelligence to decide if the IP address we handed is actually an IP address, and fail if we pass it something else. So let's try it. Let's try it. Try to do it properly. But before I do, I need to take a quick bio break. I'll be right back. I will not comment. I will not comment. To be honest, I just thought about this. There has to be one point where we do the case statement, and that will be in the class. But as someone who has been doing PHP for a bit more than a year, one thing I do know: you don't put a lot of logic into a template, and I'm not going to. Instead, there will be a new file. And it's probably something like zone record. How is it called? Resource records. And I will not comment. I will not comment. Can simply say record equals record, and we can even make this an attribute. So we get setters and getters. And then we have what I need, and just for demonstration purposes, we'll do the same as before. We'll simply output the type. Which we can without quotes, so we'll simply do add record type. We don't need to make this an attribute because it won't be accessed from the outside. And so what we'll do here is add record as we did before, which we just use, where we just use a hash. Yep, that's okay. That's okay. And all we do is we create an instead of storing this hash directly, we create a new zone resource record from this hash, and then we'll store the object. Let's call it resource record, and oops, no, that's the wrong one. So instead of an array of hashes, we'll get an array of resource records, which makes immediate sense. And in the template, which is, where is it? That's the template here. We go through these records and we call simply record by 9 entry, which should work, I guess. I think all that should change is the formatting, but it even doesn't do that. Why doesn't it change the formatting? Oh, because I indented it accidentally. If we don't want to have any spaces here, yeah, okie dokie. And so we'll actually need some kind of case record type. Oh dear, I'm blanking on the case syntax. Let's see. No, shouldn't have used the same. At least I'm not the only one who asks this question. Case X when... Okay, so it's when A, then return what? Return the name, calls it host. Well, yeah, it's here it's host, then with CNAME it's alias name, with MX it's nothing. Let's stay with the property name. So we output add record name INA add record IP address. Not quite what I had in mind. It's it just yeah, we are still not storing exactly what we need, so of course I need to store the name, which is new resource name, the zone, the type, and we also need to store the IP address. IP address, new resource IP address. Now that we pass everything in, we should see it in the file. And we do. It's really cold outside, and yeah, the heating in here doesn't quite do it. Well then, let's see how the MX record does. In this case, we need to say some kind of indentation, INA. No, it's not INA, it's INMX. And then we need to have a preference. record preference. And something I also like to do is to have something like default values. So if there is no preference, we'll simply use, say, 1. So I'll simply add a preference method that passes back record preference or 1. So I can do this. And we'll probably want to do the other things as methods as well, but makes typing easier. Let's do it at least for type. Add record type. Oh, we don't need. Have fun. Be safe, Marcus, with your birthday party. I don't know what's scarier, going to a kid's birthday party or doing a kid's birthday party or going out into this weather. Okay, case type when mx, then we'll output the preference and of course the records name. Okay, let's take a look at this. We already have an MX record in our test recipe, so it should show something, but it breaks. Local variable method record, yeah, it needs to be at record. This should be consistent. We should use this consistently. So let's add IP address, its record IP address, and the name. Name, IP address, name, oh hi Vanity Showcase, what's a web infrastructure? So the thing is, what we are doing at my company is we do web hosting for big websites, like for the Rolling Stone magazine or Doctors Without Borders. And so we have to maintain a lot of servers and running a lot of services, web servers, database servers, search content indexing servers and stuff like that. And that's what I simply called web infrastructure. Basically the computer stuff that needs to run to serve websites, especially big ones. Okay, now we have an A record and an MX record. Let's try if the the preference value works as well. Where is my test? So let's do preference 10. And let's add another MX record. With a different preference, and we'll have to extend that. The language I'm using is basically it's Ruby, and it runs in the context of Chef. Chef is a configuration management software. Basically, it's a software that you run on a server, and that software takes care of all that is there to set up. It writes configuration files, it installs software packages, it starts services, it configures network interfaces, whatever you need to be done on a server, it takes care of that. And at the moment I'm coding the logic that we need to run DNS servers for the domain lookup. So here, property preference is an integer. And with Kitchen Converge, I run a test machine, a test container here on my development environment. And inside that container, it runs Chef, and Chef executes what I'm coding, and I can see if it does what I intend it to do. Which it does in a way, but I just saw it doesn't write out the host name because I think I didn't pass any in. I'm using here the name attribute here, but of course you need to use a proper name here. So the name should be mx2, and this one here should be named mx1. So it'll be mx1.example.com and mx2example.com. Yep, that does look better. So let's do CNames as CNames next. Let's simply copy this. So that's how it's supposed to work. What Chef does is it hides all the Ruby stuff behind what's called a domain-specific language, or short DSL, and so I get to describe what I need instead of to code what I need. So I'd simply tell it here, create a few DNS records, or NSD records in this case, because the software we are using as our name servers is named NSD. Don't get confused by that. So we simply define the DNS records that we like, and in the end we say, okay, now write a zone file with all that data for the zone example.com. And that should be it. And everything else that I'm doing here is make this file here possible. DNS record is another name for the web server, so we'll use what would make sense? Something like blog. So blog.example.com is supposed to be a CName. Oh, I like that we have a name attribute, and now we'll get a real name attribute. Because that's exactly what CName does. It translates a name into a real name, into the canonical name. So that's that. And in order to do this, we need to add a property real name. And in the end, we do something like this. Well, I can copy it from above, more or less. Name, then the CName, and in this case not an IP address, but the real name. And real name needs to be a method, which simply passes me back the real name hash entry. You are right, Simon. I'm setting the title and the name attribute, which, thanks to name property, should be the same thing. In some cases, I can't use it that simply, but I should be able to do in most cases. If I do just this NSD record blog. The problem is that Chef will create NSD record resources with that name, and blog, unfortunately, it will probably not be unique, because I might have blog.somethingelse.com, and I can't simply name that other blog record with the same name. So I would have to do something like blog.example.com, which is something like this. And for example, we could use blog.notanexample.com, which also has the name blog, but for a different zone. And so that's why I'm using the name property explicitly. This might be a design weakness here, and I'll have to think about it a bit more. We could as well use the name, so we could require the resources to have the fully qualified domain name, and then simply derive the name and the zone from that, if you don't have it stated explicitly. That's something I could imagine. That probably makes sense. So we wouldn't have so neither name nor zone would be the name property, but would be calculated from the name property if they are not named explicitly. On the other hand, we need to define the zone, because there could be something like my.blog.notanexample.com, where it's not clear what the name part is until we define what the zone part is. We don't know where to split. So yeah, for the time being, I'll keep using explicit properties here. Hey Chaos Theory, thanks for following. Welcome to the stream. I hope you find it interesting. Okay, now we have a blog CNAME that points to www. NS records should be automated. Yes, I mean, I think that's exactly my point. We have to be a bit more explicit here, because we'd have otherwise things would be ambiguous one way or the other. Even though it looks redundant, it actually has more information, because blog.example.com by itself isn't telling you what the zone part and what the name part is, and these two properties do tell you this. Alright, so NS records should be automatic. Pointer records don't apply here, so our record should be automatic. I think we're done. No, SPF records, for example, should be possible as well. That's exactly what made me create this cookbook in the first place, or not create, but heavily extend it. So let's add an SPF record and text records as well, I guess. On the other hand, I think I'm getting into the area of Jochen does things very repeatedly. So let's take a turn and keep the busy work for later, and maybe outside of the stream. What we could do is create tests, for example. I think we should create tests. So we have our test recipe, and we need to have some tests. I think we don't have a test directory yet, so let's do this. Test integration. And let's do a zone spec. For testing in Chef, for writing integration tests in Chef, we use inspec. And let's take a look at an example file. We'll ignore some of the stuff. They're using. Because we simply don't need to use it. So, okay, we can go ahead directly and use the inspec resources. So let's say describe, and we'll take a look at our example file, which is in, let's say, nsd zones example.com.zone. Let's write it to test integration zone spec rb. And the most simple test would be it should exist. So if we run this with kitchen verify, it didn't run any of our tests. Why didn't it do that? Oh, of course, I'm checking a string. What I intended to check was a file. Still, it ignores my tests. Oh yeah, because I'm missing a directory hierarchy for the suite, which is default, I think. So test integration default, and then let's move the test. So spec into test integration default. What? What am I missing here? Okay, I was missing the verify definition, and it did actually find that it exists. That's a good thing. But we should test more. Its content should match in with should match. Well, let's use a regular expression here. www some kind of white space in some kind of white space a some kind of white space, and then 1 2 3 4. I hope that's what we actually using in the test file. Yeah, we do. Here, 1, 2, 3, 4. It doesn't. Why doesn't it run the second test? Oh, I'm writing the wrong file again. Let's move test integration zone spec to test integration default again. And open it up from the right place. Now it should run 2 tests. And it works. That's nice. And we'll just have to repeat this to say, okay, we should have our MX1, but you should be using pluses MX1. Very nice. I should have the same for the second MX server, that is MX2. Okay, and then we should have our CNAME. Blog in CNAME www. Nice. Okay. And just to close out this stream, let's run a full test suite where it'll destroy my test container and recreate it, run the tests, and if the tests are successful, it'll throw everything away again. And all there is to do now is to add the missing record types for SPF record and for text records, I guess, and add the appropriate tests, and then we should be able to send a pull request to the cookbook author, I guess. And everything seems to be working fine. I could also check if the service is running, but I'll do this in another test file. The tests were successful. Now it's destroying my test container again to clean my machine. And we're done. Is there something I need to still do? I've researched how to build my record collection. I've built the record resource and iterated over this collection in the zone resource. And I added integration tests. And I'm finished right on time. pretty proud of myself. So, I hope this was interesting, and I hope it wasn't too quick for you, so you could take a bit out of it. If you have any questions, hit me on Twitter, send me an email. I'd be happy to respond to any feedback I get, if it's constructive. If you have any suggestions for future streams, let me know. And for today, thank you for joining me on my stream today, and I'll see you next Tuesday, if Ireland hasn't frozen down completely until then. So, thanks a lot for watching. Take care.